And just a few words about Rupert. Rupert's love for nature goes back as far as he can remember, but found his focus in birds in his early teens, like many of us did. From bouts of twitching, went over to the dark side in the 1980s. Yes, in recent years found birding locally to be the most rewarding part of his pursuit. Top of his local patches is his garden. Now everybody knows Rupert's garden. It's probably one of the most famous gardens in Hertfordshire. A number of birds. So he's recorded 120 species to date, so it's quite remarkable. And some pretty special birds among that. And it's not just birds I know. He's also got the first record of southern damselfly in his garden as well a few years ago. So that's pretty remarkable. So anyway, Rupert joined us on the Bird Club committee in 2019. Becoming its chairman, and is looking forward to talking about his other favourite place. And if you look on the Herts Bird Club website any day, there's usually quite a smattering of records from this place. So anyway, over to Rupert, looking forward to this.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Yes, this is this Stanborough Gravel Pits has become my sort of go-to local patch over the last 3 or 4 years for its ability to turn up interesting birds. So, just out of interest, who has actually been to Stanborough Gravel Pits? Interesting, a large grouping at the back. I should point out that it is not the same place as Stanborough Lakes. If you have gone to Stanborough Lakes, you will have walked along tarmac paths and probably seen a water sports centre and not very many birds. Whereas if you have gone to the gravel pits, you'll know, because it is gravel workings, you will have got very muddy, you have been blasted by wind, and quite likely you probably won't see any birds either. But they do turn up there. It's not that easier place to, it's not that easy to find. So where are Stanborough Gravel Pits is really the first question. And it's in that pink circle, and on an OS map, it's just really a big, large, white area between St Albans and Hatfield and Welwyn. There's not much map legend to give you any clues. There's that central track that runs through the centre of the site. But the clue is really in that word workings. It's an active gravel workings, but easily missed as you hurtle along Cooper's Green Lane. And a lot of people have, I know, ended up at Stanborough Lakes a little bit disappointed. In terms of access, it's not that easy to access. Sorry?
Quick question. So is Stanborough Gravel Pits the same as Cooper's Green Pits?
Yes. So I was going to say a little bit about that later, but yes, there's a Cooper's Green complex of gravel pits along Cooper's Green Lane, and Stanborough Gravel Pits is one of those groups of gravel pits. In terms of access is not very easy either. If you want to do a nice circular walk, it's not very easy. It's a long track that goes through the site. And if you come by car, which you probably will, I would say the easiest parking to be had is along Simon's Hyde Lane, next to Simon's Hyde, Greatwood. Lots of parking along there, and then you can walk in through Simon's Hyde Farm and down that track. And most of the site can be viewed from that track. You can also park to the south of the site, and Cooper's Green Lane itself is very fast and not very safe road, and there's not much parking along it. So my advice, I had great fun with PowerPoint doing this, but there's a little road coming off Cooper's Green Lane called Great Breach Lane. Most of it is actually a public bridle way, but my recommendation would be to park at that northern edge of Hatfield Garden Village and just do the 5-minute walk into the site along that track, cross Cooper's Green Lane, and then you're onto the track in the site. And that would be the easiest way of doing that. So yeah, it's a little bit hidden, and that works to my advantage because often I'm the only one there, and there's not hordes of people and dogs and things, which suits me just fine. I did go last year to the site with a friend who had a drone, and this gives you a slightly different perspective. I can find, I think on here I've got the option of a laser pointer. Yes, so here, this line of trees around here, this is Cooper's Green Lane to the south, and this is where you walk in from that southern parking place, and that's the track going through. Well, I can't necessarily control the pointer. Track does a wiggle in the middle and goes on, and that's Simonside Farm in the distance, and with Simonside Greatwood over there. But as you can see, it's a big wide area of farmland that has been extracted for gravel. If you had seen that, if we'd done the drone maybe even just a few months earlier, this big muddy area would have been tall grass, almost like a big reed bed, and it was very sad to see them scraping it back to start backfilling. So there is restoration work, and I'll say a bit more about that later. But as you walk in, you've got this big pit on your right, and then and quite a large pit on your left as well. And as you walk along the tracks, quite a lot of scraped gravel areas and more pools, all of which are interesting to birds. I did take this yesterday as a bit of an afterthought. As you can see, it's not Stanborough Lakes, but this just gives you a sense of the space, and also, I should say, the wind, but the size of this pit on your right, with all the rainfall, it is actually now an enormous lake. It has been freshly scraped, so I'm hoping it does green up a bit more. But this, for anyone who thinks, do you know what, I'm not going there, this gives you a sense of the site, and that's the track heading off towards Simonside Farm. So I thought I did quite well. I was just sort of wheeling around, just not too unsteady. There's the deeper pit. It often gets diving ducks on it. Laser pointer. Yeah, so that gives you an idea. It is windy. Just a brief history of the site. The land itself is owned by Lord Salisbury, who is based at Hatfield House, and it's managed through his agent Gascoigne Cecil Estates. They're sort of very much in the background, but day to day the farmland is managed by Simonside Farm, and I think Cromer Hyde Farm as well to the east also help with that management. And it is, Simonside Farm keeps sheep, so a lot of the time there's sheep on the land. I think they sell the sheep for meat, and then at other times there are arable crops. So it's sort of mixed farming. Whatever they do seems to work very well for farmland birds, which is good. But for the last 20 years it has been quarried for sand and gravel by Cemex, and that is coming to an end. And last year they did begin this restoration work. The main effect of quarrying has been to greatly lower the ground level, and this in turn has meant that in effect the water table has been raised. So water is a really big issue on site, and I'm secretly hoping it might be the spanner in the works that stops them from completely restoring the gravel pits to farmland. And they themselves, having talked to the managers, are scratching their heads as to exactly what they do with all the water on site. I would say, if you do go to the site, wrap up warm. Conditions can be coastal, and this was the 31st of March, I think either last year or the year before. So the horizontal sleet can happen even in late March. So yeah, wrap up warm. You can be in St Albans, it can be lovely and calm and warm, and you can go step onto that track and get blasted because of the open nature of it. So on to the birds. I'm going to sort of do a sort of whistle-stop tour really, and I apologise if I accelerate through it, but I think the birds have been the highlight, and that's what I really want to talk about. There's a wheat here that will hopefully be turning up soon, and the site's very good for those, both in the spring and the autumn. You can have sort of up to 10 birds on site at a time. The site first sort of got its identity in 2015, and that was on the Herts Bird Club, as people began to discover that birds turned up there and began to submit records. And so it was given a name, and as I mentioned, it's part of the Cooper's Green complex, the gravel pits, there's Beach Farm, gravel pits further down the road, and various others. And this one is Stanborough gravel pit. So if you're entering bird records on the website, which hopefully you will be, that's the site to choose. And this is a larger scale map showing what we think of as the recording area. Basically to the south you've got Ellenbrook Fields, Hatfield Garden Village, and the southern border is that Cooper's Green Lane. And then up the western side is Simonshide Lane and Simonshide Greatwood, Simonshide Farm to the north, and then there's a footpath that top northern line is that runs across to Cromer Hyde. And then that north-eastern boundary is a visible boundary, really. It's not very clear on the map, but when you're on site you can see there's a clear hedge line, and generally birds beyond that are considered to be in Cromer Hyde, not in Stanborough gravel pits. But again, you can see that central track, and most of the site, again, is easily viewable from that. So, just to continue, since 2015, 152 species of bird have been recorded, which is a really good total for that site. I know it looks very barren in that video. It has been less barren, but it is essentially quite a barren site, but very attractive to all sorts of birds. Of those, 3 have been Herts rarities so far, hoping for some more: pink-footed goose, stone curlew and wryneck. I should say that the white stork, which was seen yesterday at the site, and I was there and I missed it, probably flew over my head, would also have totted it up to 153, and we'll have to think about whether that actually did push the total up, but that would be another Herts rarity, I think, for the site. It is home to, in the summer, one nationally rare breeding bird, little ring plover, and has been over the last few years the principal site for that bird. It's easy to forget the little ring plover is actually a nationally rare bird. We've got a lot of gravel pits in Hertfordshire, so we do quite well, but it is considered a scarce breeder. 25 species of wader and 21 species of wildfowl, ducks, geese and swans, 10 species of raptor, and last year we had 132 species in the whole year, which sort of puts it up there with a lot of the top sites in Hertfordshire in terms of the variety of birds that you can see. So I wanted, at this time of year, we're right on the cusp of spring, and if I go out, waders are the bird on my radar, especially at a gravel pit. And so I just wanted to talk about some of the wader highlights, and this oyster catcher was really the first migrant wader to turn up this year, bang on time when they come into Herts in early February. And it's a bird that could possibly breed at the site, but so far has just visited it. But always nice to see. And of course, from that moment on, I go to the site with anticipation, usually disappointed, but I was forced out on this very rainy day to do a dog walk, and these 4 dunlin had just appeared at the edge of one of the pools, and it's just so you can see the rain hitting the water there. So I was absolutely soaked, but absolutely thrilled at the same time, because at this time of year it just lets you know that movement has finally, after the long winter, movement has finally started. And I was trying to capture them. They were swimming as well, swimming around in the water, but I didn't quite manage to capture where they looked. But really lovely to see after a winter of not many birds. So stops there. So that's not that long ago, 22nd of February. And dunlin are birds that can turn up really any time in the year, spring and autumn, in the winter. And this was a little group of 8 birds back in 2022 in May that turned up in summer plumage. So again, really lovely to see. Of course, the bird that we're waiting for, and I think this time last year did turn up either today or tomorrow, on, I think it might be the 3rd of March, is the little ring plover. And as I said, this is one of the main breeding sites for them. And they absolutely love all the little pools, the shallow pools and the gravel. And of course they arrive and they get straight down to business. Thank you, Steve Blake, for this photo. This was actually taken a few years ago at Tithanger, but this is what they get up to. And of course it's then not long before we begin to see, if you can see them, some little ring plover chicks. So there's actually 4 there, and they're very difficult to see when they stand still. But the mother's always she's always quite close by, and I think this little bunch here at some point, I don't know whether their suspicion of me grows, but they all run in together. Here they come. And then mother obviously thinks, well, that's enough of this human being, and just comes to check me out. But yeah, it's a lovely feature of the site, and at first you can sort of keep a handle on how many plover pairs there are that have bred, but after the chicks have hatched, they then move them, and then you suddenly find another pair with another lot of chicks, and it's very difficult to keep track of how many pairs exactly have raised how many chicks, but they do quite well there. So another bird which I do love coming across in early spring is the curlew. I love walking up the track, maybe at first light, and hearing their calls coming across the farmland. And they tend to be quite noisy, thankfully, otherwise I don't think I'd ever find them. But they're also very nervous, so usually you see them briefly on the ground and then off they go. Another wader that is synonymous with the site is the green sandpiper. Pretty well any week of the year you can see them there. I think we realised last year that really there were only 2 or 3 weeks in June when they weren't there, because they head back off to their breeding grounds at the end of May, but then the first returning birds come back in mid-June, and really the most weeks of the year you've got a chance of seeing them. And of course nearby Lempsford Springs is their main wintering ground, so a lot of the birds you see may have the colourful rings on that Barry Trevis has put on, and if you ask him nicely, he'll give you a potted history of the bird, if you can note the coloured rings. A bird which I always hope for, which is closely related to the green sandpiper, is a wood sandpiper. Nice photo by Simon West, but I don't think we got any last year, but again, hopefully we'll get some this year. And the same really with sanderling as well. Always feels quite a rarity. But again, they can turn up in May and June, and I think we had quite a few records last year, but lovely little birds to see. Another one is the grey plover, which has almost become an expected bird. This was one of 2 younger birds that turned up, but we have had beautiful, couldn't find a photo unfortunately, but a beautiful bird in summer plumage as well, with a black throat and belly. But they typically turn up at this time in June. This was a lovely little autumn bird that typically turns up in October, a little stint. And I know it doesn't look very little there, but I had to employ all my fieldcraft skills to crawl along a pile of gravel to creep up on it and take this video, but actually, as it turned out, it wasn't actually that bothered by me. But best to creep up slowly anyway. But really nice to see them close to. Again, I don't think we had any last year, but it's a bird that can be looked out for. Another highlight for me last year was this turnstone that turned up and started turning stones, as they do. A very windy day this time. East wind always brings something in at Stanborough Pits, and this was no exception. It was the only record, I think, for the county last year, and it was my first turnstone in Hertfordshire. So it's good to see one that managed to survive the peregrine on the Vista Tower. But it didn't stay long, and it soon headed off. But yeah, a nice bird to see inland at any time. Of course, all waders are equal, but some are more equal than others. And this was 29th of March 2021, when an avocet turned up, and it's a dream wader to have at any inland site. Very beautiful bird. Yeah. And Simon West managed to get a lovely shot of it in flight. And it also spent the day sleeping with an extra bonus black-tailed godwit as well. 29th of March seems to be quite a good day. Unfortunately, I've realised I'm going to be away on the 29th of March this year, but this was a year later, and a stone curlew turned up. And I kicked myself at the time because I walked onto the site clattering my tripod, making a lot of noise, and of course it was only 20 yards away, and it flew up and flew right down, calling right down to the other end of the pit, hence the very sort of grainy photo. And but you can see how well they blend in, and just in case some of you can't see it or don't believe me, I removed the background. So there it is. So it is there, honest. I think there was one that year that appeared in the north of the county and did give much better views than that. So I can't mention all the waders, but they are a key part of the birds that turn up at the gravel pits. But another group of birds that again is on my radar, particularly from now on, are the pipits and wagtails. And pied wagtails are there all year round in really good numbers. I think over the winter we had probably 50 to 100 birds in the fields and around the edge of the pit. But of course, as spring advances, we begin to see some of the migrant wagtails. And they seem to arrive to coincide with the emergence of lots of little flies from the sand and the gravel. And at the top there you've got a white wagtail with its lovely pale grey back contrasting with its black nape, and then a lovely little yellow wagtail as well. And they are a real highlight for me in spring. Sometimes you can be on site and you can get, I think this little group of, I think it's 8 in that tree, were part of probably about 30 yellow wagtails. And they were all sort of running all over the place with their lovely little high-pitched calls. And you really feel like spring has arrived at that point. Of course, it's worth searching the wagtails for the more unusual ones. And this one is a blue-headed yellow wagtail, so it's not a separate species, but it is actually the European race of yellow wagtail. You can see it's got that quite sort of dark bluey-grey head and a strong white stripe above its eye. And again, it stands out, but you sort of have to look for it, and I think part of me likes why I like this group of birds is I like the challenge of trying to find the different one. And we've had a few of these turn up, and they are quite striking birds. There it is, you can see it, its sort of ear coverts appear as quite dark compared to our ones. And here's another one. This is the lovely photos by Dan Fletcher. The bird in the middle is what we might call a channel wagtail, and that's what happens when a blue-headed yellow wagtail breeds with one of our own British yellow wagtails, which you can see either side of it there. And you get this lovely sort of watered-down bluey-grey head. You can see that as well in this picture. So it's not quite as strongly marked as the blue-headed one, but again, a lovely little bird to come across, especially I think in that light that Dan managed to capture them in. And then every now and again, something sets the heart racing. And this was again a long way off, but I thought it was worth including because Stanborough does quite well for oddities. And this was a pistic pied wagtail, or maybe a white wagtail. Had a yellow beak, but it was nearly all white apart from those darker feathers, and had us scratching our heads for a while. As well as the wagtails, there's the pipits, and again, favourite of mine really, searching through the pipits, trying to find the oddity. This is the one you're most likely to see, meadow pipit, with its fine streaking and pink legs, moves around very fast. They're there throughout the winter, and the numbers pick up in spring. But really, in amongst them, you hope to find something like this, which you'd more typically find on the coast. This is a little rock pipit. And as you can see, it's a sort of smudgy effect. Not the clean stripes, much darker bird, bigger bird, moves around much more slowly, and quite sort of stands out in its own way. But it's quite a different bird, and very nice to find crawling around or hopping around at the edge of the pits, finding those insects. This was March 21. And they do occasionally turn up in the autumn as well, usually in October. But the real treasure is a water pipit. And if you see one like this in summer plumage, it is very striking. There's hardly any streaking, lovely pale breast, and that very strong white stripe over its eye. Tom also took another picture. You can see how its back hasn't got any streaking. It's a sort of grey-brown colour. But I'm hoping for those, again, I actually wasn't there on that day, so I missed those ones. But hopefully we'll get more of those. So yeah, finding the detail, I quite like that about the place. Another group of birds, which the site's very good for, is wildfowl, ducks, geese and swans. And this is a bird that can turn up in spring, nice male gargony, and they're absolutely beautiful in their summer plumage, the males particularly, and we've had them on a number of occasions. The site's proved quite good for them. This was 3 that flew over my head initially, and I heard a funny little grunting sound, like I thought it sounded like a baby pig or something. And it was these 3 birds, the 2 males were chasing the female as they arrived, and their little rattly call was coming out. I think in their excitement sounded more like a little snorting pig. But another classic sort of bright shot from early spring. And birds I find often arrive like that. The males, they're oblivious to you, the males are just chasing the females. It's getting straight down to business. So lovely little birds. Another beautiful bird, which rather oddly is the site is associated with, are the mandarin ducks. And this is a typical sort of photo that I took elsewhere of a pair on a sort of wooded pond. And they are ducks that nest in trees, and it always feels strange that Stanborough Gravel Pits is such a good place for them. At Stanborough you'll see them on the gravel, sitting more like this. And it's a bit of a mystery. There aren't many trees at Stanborough Gravel Pits, so they're either breeding in trees and then trekking quite a long way with their ducklings, or maybe they're finding some other place to breed that we don't know about. But at some point they emerge with an awful lot of ducklings, and these are quite well-grown ones, but they will suddenly emerge with a huge number, and typically I think mandarin have sort of about 10 to 12 eggs in their clutch. So they're also known for egg dumping, and whether a mother is sitting on an incredible number of eggs, or maybe there's a sort of, she's operating a creche for other ducklings, I don't know, but this is something that you get to see in the early summer period, is all these mandarin ducklings running around the site. And it is a bit of a mystery as to where exactly they breed, and also where they go, because they're not there in the winter. And most of the ducklings seem to survive, as far as you can tell, so at some point they disappear off to other places. So it's an unexpected bird for the site. I nearly didn't include pintail because this was back in 2021, and I was thinking, well, we haven't really had many records since, but almost as I had that thought, the other day, they very kindly, 6 of them turned up. This was just the other day on the 28th of February. Beautiful birds, and again, they just stayed a day. Most birds, it seems, at Stanborough hang around very briefly, and so you have to sort of, you're lucky if there's birds there, then that's great, and you turn up the next day and they've all gone. But again, a beautiful duck to have there. In the winter of 2021, we did quite well for grey geese, and this was a white-fronted goose that spent some time by a pool in the arable fields, and a few days later, a pink-footed goose turned up as well, found by Jamie Brown. And so that was, we haven't had any since, but they're sort of attractive. The farmer does like to occasionally shoot over the land, and one of the things he does is put out big piles of grain, which actually ends up benefiting most of the visiting ducks and things. And thankfully he doesn't shoot very often, but it does mean that there is a chance of these sort of birds being attracted in. Now I know Graham also has already shown you this, so I won't bore you with it, but I thought I'd still include it because for me this was an absolute highlight of last year. Buick swans are, sorry, you've got the wind there, hold on. Yeah. There we go. They're rare. They're, you know, even if you go up to Cambridgeshire, they're still quite hard to find amongst the hoopers. Yeah. And it felt like, you know, this is just a puddle in a muddy field, you know, and yet here they are, absolutely beautiful. And so for me, turning up at site and finding those, and I know a handful of people were able to get there just in time to see them before they headed off. But they arrive and they try to go to sleep, they do a bit of preening, a bit of washing, and a bit of interaction, and then they're off. And there's always that sense of movement with birds like that. But yeah, again, really lovely to see. Yes, there we go, 30th of November that was. So another group of birds, the birds of prey, raptors, and you're very likely to see peregrines at the site. They're nearly always around, and recently this is one of a pair of adults that have taken up to sitting on the mud by the gravel pits, much to the consternation of the other birds. And I'm hoping that they go off and find somewhere to breed, because I'm hoping they don't sort of just ward off anything that comes into the site. But they do add a lot of drama to the site, because they'll occasionally get up and start trying to hunt pigeons, and of course everything goes up. But they're always lovely to see, always welcome, even if they do sort of act as rather a deterrent to other birds. Another bird which, sorry, there you go. Another bird which, this is an appalling video, just what you call a record shot. Another bird that I've been quite surprised at how regularly it's occurred in the winter months is the merlin. And this was one that, the only one I think I've seen perched at Stanborough Gravel Pits. And it just perched for a little while by that pool. But we've had probably 10 to 15 records now of merlin, which is great when you consider that the only other place in the county is up on the Wallington Road, up in the north of the county, where you regularly see them. So the flocks of birds in the fields are definitely pulling in the raptors. So if you're lucky, you'll see one there. I was there last week, and there was a male attacking the starling flock and managed to catch a starling, but again sort of took it away and disappeared. I was hoping it would sit down and provide some photo opportunities, but it didn't. Other raptors that we've had marsh harrier come through quite a few times, that one in August 2021, and Steve Blake, lucky enough, I think he was the only one to see it, but a hen harrier came through. Both the site looks very suitable for harriers, so hopefully we'll get more of those. And last spring we had an osprey come through in the evening, beautiful light. It came through and it did its hovering thing over the main lake, and rather hopefully, I think, looking for fish, but of course I don't think there are any fish in the gravel pit, and certainly not any big ones. And eventually a lapwing single-handedly saw it off and chased it off, and it headed over to Brocket Park, where it probably had more success fishing. So yeah, always a possibility both in spring and autumn. And then not really a raptor, but this winter has been particularly good for these birds, short-eared owls. And the eyes have it. But there were 4 birds actually this evening, and sadly they didn't hang around through December and January, but on this particular evening it was a lovely still evening, as you can tell from the lack of shake in the video, and these 4 birds just hunted over the farmland, perched up, and this actually had another bird to its left perched up as well, but gave absolutely brilliant views, and I think took the site total over 150. That was one of the new birds for the site last year. Ooh, there it is, 28th November. So, just moving on, trying to keep time. What time am I meant to? Oh, okay, that's fine. Some pasturine highlights. The farmland seems to be very good for farmland birds, and at the moment, if you go there on a nice still day, you will be deafened by skylark song, and you also hear these yellowhammers singing, and it is a great place. Some winters we've had huge flocks of linnets and goldfinches. I think we had one year over 1,000 linnets in the fields, and it just seems to be very good for farmland birds. And one of the birds that very pleased to have, again, quite difficult to find away from the north of the county, is the corn bunting. And last year we had 2 singing males. It seemed to be there were 2 pairs, and were able to observe them, one mating and then one feeding young. So we know that they bred last year, but can't compete with the yellowhammer on plumage, but it is nevertheless a lovely little bird to have there. Another bird that we're expecting any day now, from now on, is the sand martin, and they do have a colony at the site. It's very difficult to tell how many breed. They do make holes in the sand, but they have a real penchant for the freshly dug sand, so of course they're always competing with the diggers, and the quarry are quite good at watching to make sure they leave the freshly scraped cliffs, but it is difficult. They seem to dig lots of holes, and it's not clear whether they're actually then nesting there or not, but just a couple of nice shots by Simon West, and hopefully they will be there very soon. probably on a windy, cold, rainy day. Poor things. Another little bird that's turned up. We've been a bit spoilt for these in St Albans this winter with the one on the Abbey, but this was a lovely male that turned up in spring and seemed to like the red machinery and was finding lots of flies around that, but we have had them in October as well. And a ringoozle, again, turned up in the horse paddocks. Always nice to find one of those, and I think that's probably one of maybe only one or two records at the site, but another bird that's quite possible. The real passerine highlight was the wryneck in September 2022. This was the day that I headed off to Cornwall, and so I got the message in the car, but it was all too late to turn back. And but it proved very elusive. So this was another photo by Simon West, who did very well to capture this. But it's hard to picture that track as dry and dusty, having just seen those videos. But at some point the track is dry and dusty, and it's a perfect place for the wryneck. And Steve Pearce actually found this, flew up from the track. So a bit of a shame I missed it, but you know, there we go. Can't get them all. And don't mention the white stork yesterday either. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the what are for me highlights. I haven't mentioned everything. There are other waders that come through and other birds. It's a good place for stonechat, good place for windchat as well. I could go on. I thought I'd mention that it's also quite good for mammals. It's one of the best places I know to see brown hares. There's usually a lot out, increasingly from now on, boxing in the fields. And there's also a sort of roving herd of about 10 to 15 fallow deer that you often see early in the morning or maybe in the evening. And we have seen roe deer there, and then the badgers have apparently seemingly cost the quarry a lot of money. They've fenced off, the quarry has these huge piles of soil waiting to be put back, and of course the badgers think that's great. But the quarry has spent a lot of presumably money and time moving badgers, and now they've also fenced all of these earth bunds and you know, just miles and miles and miles of fencing just for the badgers, just to keep them out, to save them having to move them again. So the quarry people know all about the badgers, although I've yet to see one on site. Foxes, muntjac, they're all there. So really, just to wrap up, the question is what next? I mentioned that the site very sadly is being restored as of last year, and the goal, I think, is to restore as much of it to farmland. I've had lots of chats with the quarry managers about what's going to happen, and they will be leaving some pools there, but they won't be as big as they are now, and they are hoping to plant some trees and hedgerows, but the main thing is they have a real problem with the amount of water on site, and there is so much water that it keeps stopping them from working, and they are talking about putting in a pumping system that will pump the water off-site down the road to one of the other Cooper's Green gravel pits, which I've told them I think is a waste of time, and they should really just admit it's a very good nature reserve. But they themselves don't actually know what it's all going to look like. They know what they've been told to do, but because of the amount of water, there will definitely still be some wetland there. So I am sort of hoping that this talk is a celebration of the site, celebration of the site, not a sort of obituary, because you know, you see the diggers out and they work very fast, and you know, they've already restored some of it. But as far it does seem, being on site, as fast as they drain the water, as far, you know, it accumulates even faster. So yeah, we shall see. But in terms of birds, it continues to be very good, and it's perhaps looking at its best at the moment. There's not that much vegetation, but it is looking very good. And I think when I was writing this, I was thinking, well, what haven't we still had? In terms of waders, there's not. Would be an expected bird, maybe Tennington. Another bird that I don't think we've recorded at the site is a redstart, quite possible. And of course, Caspian gull would be another bird. We've had Mediterranean gulls, yellow-legged gulls, but Caspian gull would be good. And I, of course, dream of walking onto the track and seeing a pair of black-winged stilts, discussing how wonderful it would be to breed at the site. But we'll see. In fact, actually, yesterday was a one that I didn't see coming, which was the white stork, which apparently flew over my head while I was there, and missed it. So it remains a fantastic site for bird. There's a lot of correlation between what Graham White was talking about, this problem of gravel pits and what happens to them. Eventually it will overgrow if it's just left, or it will become a fishing lake. And I would love to be able to get into that process early on and say, look, can we not just manage this as a nature reserve? But often these things have been set in motion many years before, and it's quite difficult to get into that process. But I would say enjoy it while it lasts. It's a fantastic site, and I hope I've given you a flavour of it in that. So thank you.